Dave, it's that time once again. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Very excited to be back.
Dave, I love having you on the show because not only do I get to throw a million questions at you, but I like that familiarity. I can't even talk today, but I like having you here because I'm comfortable with it. And I feel like we really, bond over these opportunities to grow as we talk about retirement.
Likewise, and hopefully I can stay focused here, CR. The last couple of days have been very interesting for me. Yesterday I was on a live webinar and one of my sons comes and stands at the door like he desperately needs something and he stands there for 5 minutes. And I'm like, there's nothing I can do for you. I'm in the middle of the webinar. I can't just stop teaching 200, I think we had about 250 people. I just stop and not do that. Well, today we're doing construction. I've been up and down the stairs working with the contractor. So hopefully they're good. I've assigned my daughter to take care of them until my wife gets back, but hopefully we don't get a bunch of interruptions and all of a sudden it's just you and an empty camera over here.
And Dave, to paint that picture, when people come to your office, it's just a big glass door, right? So you can just see him just staring at you.
Yeah, and he's just looking at me like, Dad, you've got to help me. Come out here. And I'm sitting here going, Josh, there is nothing I can do for you right now. I'm not going to disrupt this whole webinar so I can take care of whatever it was you needed. And come to find out, it wasn't that important. When we got downstairs, he wanted to complain about something his brother had done.
Wow. Well, I hope we can help you stay focused today with all of these great questions. As always, Dave, we have so many awesome questions that come into us. They come into us from our website, they come in through social media, they come in through webinars. And Dave, it's our job to make sure we get the best questions so we can help those who are seeking help in retirement, especially just trying to get a difference going. I think the biggest thing right now is just trying to help people just get motivated to start.
It really is. It's trying to get people to take action, to start doing something about their retirement. I've gone through some recent surveys, got some statistical information here that I've gone through recently. And COVID really has not helped us. There's some statistics showing that people have gotten a little better educated. But we've got a large percentage of people that are just saying, look, I don't even want to think about it. I've got so much stress in my life right now. How can I think about something that may be 20, 30, 40 years in the future? I just don't even want to deal with it. Unfortunately, that's the problem we've had really going back to the 70s. 1970s is when we started transitioning into an employee funded retirement, where it's really more on us than our employer pension plans. And we've not done a good job. We just have too many other things going on. And so we're just kicking the can down the road, and it's not helping any of us.
Well, I appreciate you being with us, Dave, and I appreciate those here live and those on replay. And again, if you are here live, go ahead and submit your questions in the comments, and we'll do our best to take a break in between our other questions and answer your question as well. Well, Dave, let's get into it. I know people are here ready to see how well you answer some of their questions. So let's get on to it with my first one from Joshua. This is not your Joshua that was standing outside the door, by the way, just to make that clear.
I just wanted to make sure that he wasn't sending you messages to get to me. He's like, look, if my dad wanted to deal with this, maybe I send CR a message and he can get the question answered.
I can put it on the live show. Well, Dave, this is from Joshua, and he's saying, would you recommend a reverse mortgage to make major accessibility renovations to a home?
Joshua, I absolutely would not be against it. When we look at the purposes that you would use a reverse mortgage for, and there's about 10% of America that a reverse mortgage can be a really good thing for them to be put into place. I would not be against it because it may be far cheaper to take the reverse mortgage out as much as it may cost in fees to set it up and be able to make those changes and stay in your home that you're very familiar with, be able to stay in the community where your friends are at, be able to stay maybe around family members that live there. So could be a very good decision for you to allow you to continue to maintain somewhat similar lifestyle to what you've had as you go into those retirement years where your mobility may not be what it used to be.
Dave, is there any restrictions when we talk about home improvements as we look at reverse mortgages?
There really isn't. In fact, when we look at a reverse mortgage, there's really no guidelines on what we can do with the money. Now, there's some guidelines in regards to, hey, you're only going to be able to get so much based upon your home value. Hey, if you've got other debt, it's got to be paid off before we put the home mortgage or the reverse mortgage into play. And it may be as part of the closing costs and the closing process of getting that mortgage. If you've got an outstanding debt that's small enough that a reverse mortgage could pay that off and then still give you some money out of there. But there's really no restrictions of what you do with the money.
And Dave, I like that you talked about making sure that people are comfortable in their home because they love being in their home and they want to be able to make it so it's maybe wheelchair accessible, something that they could come in and just really work at. Because if they lose their mobility, they really want to be comfortable. And I think that you brought on a great point with that.
And more of us really need to start addressing it younger in our lives. It's interesting for me. I live in an area and we've been looking for a single story home because now we've got the one daughter we've adopted that is special needs. We've got another child coming in that we will adopt that is in a wheelchair. So we've been looking at for a single story home. You can't find them, CR, in the area that we're in at the size we need because the number of children we have, they're not existent. And it's very surprising because just next door to us in the neighborhood next to us, it's all older people. I mean, we probably average age is 70 years old. So you've got to think that many of them have these huge houses they're only able to use half of. Most of them can't even get up the stairs to be able to get into that other half of the house. And so they've got a master bedroom downstairs, laundry room, kitchen, all of that. And they're just living in half of their house. So definitely something we need to look at probably sooner than later as we get into our retirement to make sure that we're in the place that's going to allow us to stay there if that's where we want to stay.
Great point, Dave. All right, let's jump over to my next one here from Skylar. If my employer suspends their 401k program, what are my next best options?
Get a new job. No, I'm not telling you got to leave your job, but at some level, I will tell you the 401k is one of the best retirement investment options you have from the volume of money you can get in there. And especially if they've got a 401k with a Roth option on there, that's obviously what we're looking at when we look at tax rates in the future. And there are some limits. Again, we're not maybe going to max fund this thing if we've got a situation where the employer contribution is very small or not what it should be. We just want to go up to the limits there. But seriously, from an investment standpoint, I would look at the Roth IRA. Definitely make sure you're maxing that out if you can. And then you're going to have to start looking at permanent insurance. And I would look at the indexed universal life policy as an option to get that tax-free growth, tax-free distribution, very similar to what you'd be getting out of that 401k program from work, but where you have a little more control and say what happens there.
Dave, I'm afraid as we talked even just a little bit earlier about the pandemic and the things that are happening, do you see things like this happening where employers are getting after different things like the 401k?
I haven't seen it so much through the pandemic. Now, I have seen a little bit of it, but not like I did back in 2008. Maybe it's as bad as pandemic was, everything didn't collapse quite like it did back in 2008. You had much more government assistance coming in to help many of the companies there. So I haven't seen it as at such a high level. But yes, there are people out there canceling their health insurance for the employees, canceling their 401ks, maybe trying to adjust the salary. Now, right now, pretty hard to lower the salary because people are demanding more and more money, but we are seeing a little bit of this and concerning. Again, in my opinion, every employer should have some type of plan available for their employees because we are in an employee funded retirement. We need them to be having access to buckets of retirement assets that they can put into to help them get where they need to be 30, 40, 50 years from now.
And Dave, if we're quite young, we just start a new job, let's say we're in our 20s and these 401ks are available, do you really encourage people to push toward that as well, besides those who are later?
Absolutely. And maybe it's only up to the match. Again, we definitely want to take advantage of the free money that the employer's offering. So we definitely want to go up to the match. But then from there, we've got to look at the other needs and what you're trying to get into. One of the other problems, CR, is some employer plans are where they do not allow in-service distributions. So if you've got one of those plans, we want to be very careful to where we're not putting all of our money in there. And then you get in a position where you need to get it out and you really don't have a lot of freedom to do that. You may not even be able to roll it into other types of investments that are out there that your plan doesn't offer. So there's some guidelines we want to look at there, but definitely want to get up to that employer match to really help us get that extra money that can help us along the way.
Great point. All right, Dave, let's jump down to my next one here from Vinny. My 50-year-old client will have a government-sponsored pension when he retires. Should he invest too?
This is a good question, and it brings about probably more questions than answers from my side. As you look at this, number one, we want to understand how much that pension is. You've got to understand what his lifestyle expectations are and how much of his pension is going to cover that lifestyle, how much of that's going to go towards there. Another thing we've got to look at, if it's a government pension, he may have the Social Security reduced under the windfall elimination provision. So we've got to look at the reduction there. What impact is it going to have on his Social Security? And then number three would be saying, okay, if we've got Social Security, we got the pension, we've got our needed income requirements. If we're short, or if we believe we're going to have some shock or aspirational expenses we wouldn't be able to cover out of our normal checks coming in, then yeah, we need to make sure we're putting some money aside as well.
Dave, is Vinny's client too late coming and asking for this advice? Do you feel like he's in the right time frame?
No, I mean, if you look at it, obviously, the sooner we can get in here, the better. But reality, this is when people really start thinking about it. They've gotten the kids out of the house. Now they're trying to look at retirement. They're saying, I've got maybe 15 years that I can do some pretty heavy savings. I can start getting things set aside. And again, in this side too, we need to look at it because obviously if you're someone that doesn't want to pass money on, if you're looking at it and saying, hey, I don't have a bunch of kids, and even if I do, I don't want to give it to them. Well, they're right. Do you really need to save a bunch more if you've got this guaranteed income coming in? Why not just spend it, enjoy your life, do all the things that you want to do? So there is definitely a lifestyle expectation and look at that we've got to consider when we go through this process, because there are a lot of people, I will tell you, CR, save way more money than they should. And then they never spend it, and then they give it to their kids, and it ruins their kids' lives. And it's like, you know what, you'd have been far better off if you just spent that money and ran a better budget, allowed you to do the things you wanted to do, and not put this extra burden back on your kids.
And Dave, how do we help those that are falling into this trap again, where they're just saving, and they're not spending anything on their own, and then, like you said, are just going to their kids or grandkids, and it's causing major issues?
Yeah, one of the things that I recommend for people is to get into these guaranteed income streams. I mean, you look at a pension, you look at annuities. Again, pretty easy, especially if they're inflation adjusted, to say, look, I can live within this amount of a lifestyle. I mean, I know, and I assume you would know, saying, hey, I'm not going to go spend $1 million a year. That's just not me. Even if I had millions of dollars, I'm not going to go buy a big boat. I'm not going to go buy, some nice RV or whatever the case may be. That's just not the lifestyle I want to have. So as I look at it and say, okay, if I can get the guaranteed income that's going to fall in wherever it is, if it's 100,000 or 300,000 or whatever that dollar amount might be, once we get that set in place, we don't have to worry so much. Again, excluding, hey, what happens if we've got to do something in the house and it's going to cost us 50 grand? So maybe we're setting a lot smaller amounts aside as we're tying our income into these income streams.
Definitely a great point. And I want to remind you, if you're here with us live, go ahead and submit your questions, and we'll do our best to get those in between these other questions here. And Dave, we've got our lucky one here that is asking a question in Meredith. Recently, my spouse and I downsized our home. I don't even know how you're getting a home right now all across the U.S., but should we use the extra money to purchase a life insurance policy?
Looks like age 63, so it could be a good option when we look at it, again, depending on what you want that money to do and what other assets you have. If you have no other assets out there, I would not tell you to put all the money into a life insurance policy, because it's going to get locked up for a period of time. You're not going to be able to have just immediate access to just start pulling that money out. But it definitely could be a good option, because always what they've got here, CR, is money in a taxable bucket that's more than they should have. They're not going to be able to put it into a Roth account, based upon their situation and assuming the amount of money they made. So how do we get it into tax-free? Life insurance policies can be a great way to use for the bond portion of the portfolio, and could be a really good option for them.
Dave, besides downsizing to a home, what other options could we make right now? Even Meredith, if she was not to downsize, what are other options where she could get more cash, is what I'm assuming right now, to be able to put into different areas?
Yeah, for a lot of people, there's not a lot of options out there. Now, obviously, the housing market has gone crazy over the last few years. What's going to happen? Interest rates are going up. I was shocked the other day to realize they're over 5% already,
Wow.
even though the interest from a government standpoint has only gone up 0.25%. Well, you take, okay, there was a period is 2.75 on average to 3, goes up a quarter. You wouldn't expect that much, but they're looking out to the future saying, look, what are interest rates going to do over the next 30 years? So they're going up. It's going to get to 7. It's going to get to 8. Well, we're going to have a lot of issues as we deal with that. So for most people, they don't have access to a lot of extra cash besides their home. But again, you've got to figure out what you're going to do. And I'll tell you too, if you're looking at one of these houses, you've got to take into consideration what's going on. I realize you want to get locked into a low interest rate. Many people are doing that and saying, look, I don't want to be stuck at 7. Well, again, people aren't going to be able to afford that house at 7%. So it's going to push the value down. Personally, I'd rather be paying 18% interest on a $100,000 house than I would be paying 3% interest on a $500,000 house, because if the market's only 100 grand, I just lost $400,000. I got to be responsible for, at least on the 18% payment. I can adjust it at some point. I hope we don't get there. Again, people, please know, I hope we don't get to 18%. It's going to be a bloodbath out there for people financially, but understand, just a low interest may not be your best option if we've got prices that are going to get pushed back down.
Dave, I think that is a fantastic point, and I think that's one thing that we need to address in future shows, because I agree with what you're saying. A lot of us are just trying to catch that quick wave or the moment, but we're not really looking down the road. And like you're saying, this is something it's gonna happen, Dave. We just have to look at it right now to say, hey, what's our best possibility?
Far too many of us are in a situation where we have the fear of missing out. We're watching everyone else get into these homes. We watch people make substantial amounts of money on these homes. In fact, I was looking at my home in Utah. I was shocked. My one I have in northern Utah, how much it's worth. I'd never pay that amount for it. Glad somebody else is willing to pay that amount for it, but I sure wouldn't pay that amount for the property that we have there. But yet we're watching it go up, and people are saying, look, I'm watching my friends make hundreds of thousands of dollars. I don't want to miss out on that. Guess what? You've missed out. That's happened. That's ship sailed. People that have made that kind of money, it's not going to continue across the country with all the adjustments that have to be made now to get us back where we are. And the same with the stock market. Again, you missed that 20% year. You missed 25%. All these things that happened, they've come and gone. We're going to see some real pushbacks. People cannot continue to afford gas prices where they are. They can't afford food. I went the other day, and again, this is UPS. And again, I realize it's a small thing, CR, when you look at it. I had to go get a notary done the other day. Used to pay $10. 2 months ago, I was paid $13. That's a 30% increase. Now, yes, it's only $10, but if we look at it and say, hey, if things are going up 20 and 30% across the board, inflation's way worse than the 8.5% we're being told.
And Dave, I appreciate that, because my son works at Walmart and he comes back every day and says, hey, Dad, the groceries are going up. And we have lots of conversations about it. And I think that's a valid point that you bring up. Even my wife said, I saw a 13-year-old on the news that is selling NFTs and she's making millions. And I think there's so much information out there that we're all trying to gather to say, hey, what can we do? But I think what you're saying is we really need to make sure we're putting a plan together, because all of these things are such variable options that aren't working for everyone.
Yeah, and the hope of getting the unicorn, I mean, again, it's overrated. We obviously see all of that. It's like those people that go to the casinos, and you hear about the few that end up winning, or the state lottery. I follow that a little bit here. I don't gamble at all, but it's interesting to me to see how much money goes into the Tennessee state lottery. Well, you obviously hear about the big winners and they have them on the news, but they never take that person who lost everything they had and put them on the news and talk about that situation. They never take the investor who lost everything in cryptocurrency or whatever the case may be because they didn't know what they were doing, and put them on the news. So you got to understand what you're being pitched isn't what reality is. Look across your friends and neighbors. Again, we're not all living in multi-million-dollar houses. You understand that the people are poor. As you know, we end up at the Grizzlies playoff game, CR. We got tickets to that. And I keep telling my boys as we go to these games, when we're sitting there, there's no kids in that audience comparative to what the other games are. And it's like, good guys, these tickets are so expensive. The average family, no way they're bringing their kids to this. Mom and dad are coming out, but you've maybe got 5%, 3% of them in the audience that are kids, because people can't afford it. And that goes into, far more important things in a ball game: food, gas, clothing, all these things that are happening out there.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Well, Dave, as we get to my next question, I just wanted to talk about the days of, we work, those golden days when we count on our employee pension and Social Security to cover those costs during these, so-called golden years. Because as we get into my next question, this is Emmanuel. I couldn't fit his whole name here with everything else, but for 15 years, I worked for a company where Social Security was taken out. For a while now, I've been working for a company that provides pensions. Am I still eligible to receive Social Security when I retire after age 70?
You're still going to be able to receive it, and depending on the way that pension's structured, you'll be able to receive it all. It sounds like he's not working; the individual's not working for the government, so it's not a government-based pension. So the assumption is you're having Social Security still withheld out of your check, which means even now you're still adding to those Social Security benefits, and it's not going to affect you at all. The only time that your Social Security benefits get affected is if you're working for a government entity that's not withholding Social Security, and you don't have enough years into the Social Security program to be able to qualify to get 100% of your benefits. And even there, you only get a reduction. It's not a complete takeaway of the benefits you have available.
So, Dave, as I kind of addressed this earlier, everyone has been sitting back. Well, not everyone, but those with the pensions and Social Security saying, hey, this is going to take care of everything. And we've been talking about a whole different concept here, especially as we're diving into this, that people really need to be prepared and not just focus on that one or two of those alone.
And we also need to look at this, CR, to where we understand this. And I appreciate this question when we look at what's going on here. But this is something we all need to know. We need to understand, what's our Social Security really going to look like? Do we have a government pension that may reduce that? Is our work record affected that? Are we basing our Social Security, like my wife would, on spousal benefits because she doesn't have enough of a work record outside of the home? We need to know all of this stuff so then we can plan appropriately. The problem is we get far too many of us. So we get to age 65 or 70, and then all of a sudden wake up and say, hey, what's going to come in? All my friends are retired. I got to assume I'm going to get enough money. And then you get to a situation like this where all of a sudden it's like, hey, no, your Social Security just got cut by $500 a month. Well, maybe that was $500 you were expecting, but you didn't know the laws and the way they're structured. And now it's drastically affected your freedoms and what you're able to do in retirement.
And Dave, another thing we talked about is the inheritance. You talked about that with several clients that pass that over to their children. And I really love this question from Rosie because I feel like this is something that we need to talk about. But she said, my client received a generous inheritance from her mother to set herself up for retirement. Should I recommend she purchase several annuities?
Rosie, great question. Now, you need to understand when we look at this, suitability is a very important thing when we're talking about annuities. We need to make sure that it's a suitable product and the amount of annuities you're buying are suitable based upon their situation. What we don't want is someone taking, let's say that there's a $2 million inheritance coming in, and all of a sudden you just take 100% of that and put it into annuities. No insurance company is going to allow you to do that because annuities are a tool. It's just like doing yard work. You got maybe a rake, a hoe, and a shovel. When we're looking at our retirement, we're going to have Social Security, annuities. Maybe we have life insurance. We got stock market, real estate, whatever the case may be. So not against putting some money in there and not against buying several of them. Because again, when we look at it, you may be in a situation where you based upon her income needs, she starts annuitizing a few of them, and then time goes on, maybe your income needs go up. And so she annuitizes a couple of more and getting a higher percentage out of those because she waited. So not against it, but I think a whole plan needs to be put together to figure out what portion that should be and where her Social Security's at and what other goals that she has. What does she want to do with her money while she's alive? And what does she want to do with it once she passes away?
And Dave, the one thing I really like about this question, though, is the fact that she is even looking at putting that inheritance into some type of retirement plan. Because Dave, you and I have known a lot of people that get money as an inheritance. Even friends of ours that get this money and they go on every vacation possible. They buy the boat, they buy that RV. And I just love the fact that there's some people out there who are actually trying to say, yeah, I need to be able to set myself up for retirement before I look at anything else, before I look at vacations.
Yeah, I was a little shocked at some statistics I heard this morning. Now, I don't know for sure where they came from. They were on the radio, but it was coming from a show that seems to give statistics on a regular basis. So I've got to believe that there's some credibility to them. So I was shocked. Less than 10% of America that's getting tax refunds this year plans to actually blow it on just nothing, which my experience as a CPA, it's always been way higher than that. Usually there's a big refund coming back and the big screen TV comes in, the truck they don't need, whatever the case may be. But most people were going to use it to either pay bills they had, which is good, pay off debt. Mm-hmm. We're going to use it to save and put aside for something they needed here in the near future, or put into retirement. And I hope that's true. As we look at that, that's a statistic. Now, all that being said, over 50% of America didn't pay tax. So, had they been in a situation where they would have need to file and got a refund, would have they been in a situation that 50% would have increased the number? I don't know, but it is good to see, CR, that people are taking an interest in their future and realizing that someone's got to do it. We can't rely on the government to take care of us for the rest of our lives.
So, Dave, the guy I saw buying 4 TVs at the store is not probably in the same boat of what you're talking about.
Yeah, usually not. Now, and again, who knows what's going on there? But yeah, usually not. I mean, I'll tell you, it's really hard as a CPA sometimes to just watch people, especially with a lot of the credits that come out there. And again, I realize we all have this fear of missing out. We all have this fear that we're not going to be able to enjoy the same life someone else is. But being in debt and spending every dollar we have, I've never seen anyone that's really super happy that's doing that. That's not necessarily the way to have peace and have a happy life.
And if you have a lot of money, Dave, clients of yours, are they happy? Because it seems like they have all the money under the sun.
Yeah, you know what? When it comes down to it, money's not going to buy happiness. I will tell you that. Obviously, there's a certain level that brings you a level of stability, a level of comfort. But the real happiness comes in relationships. I've got a client right now that's worth millions and millions of dollars. He could retire and never have to worry. His wife's sick. and she's been begging him to travel. Now she's getting to the point, I don't think she's going to be able to do it. And he's going to have to live with that the rest of his life. And he's now bringing it up. I pushed him. In fact, I begged him in a meeting one day. I said, look, please go take time off work, go on a vacation. If you will do anything for me as your advisor. And now he's finally come back and saying, you know what, I should have done it. It's too late now. And I don't want those too lates for you guys. You know, as we look at this, it's like, hey, let's take care of the things we need to take care of. Let's build those relationships. But yes, we also need to save, but let's do it appropriately. And you're right, CR, you know, we talked about it before. We talked about one of the challenges people have. If you're a saver, sometimes it's hard to ever spend. And so you just have endless money. If you're a spender, you don't save. Well, we got to find that happy medium to say, hey, we can spend, we can save, and we can have good relationships, and we can have a pretty peaceful, nice life as we go through the process.
Yes, I agree. Dave, let's get on Paul's question here. Paul is saying, when budgeting now to save for retirement, what is the best piece of advice to give clients?
The biggest thing I can tell anyone, get a plan together. So you got to have a roadmap of what it is. Again, you got to answer, what do you want your money to do while you're alive? What do you want your money to do once you pass away? Put that plan together and then start getting educated. Those are the top two things I would tell you. And then you come into, how do we save? The plan's going to tell you. Okay, do I go into a 401k? Do I go into an IRA? Do I put life insurance together? That's what the plan's for. But then again, get yourself educated so you understand why the plan's being put together and make sure it makes sense for you. You know, we've gone through the process with the advisors we work with of doing a pretty extensive review of who they are and the recommendations to make sure they fall in line with the things that we recommend and that should be done. But that's not the case with every advisor. I had someone reach out to me the other day that said, look, I had one of my best friends sell me something, try to sell me something. I didn't buy it, try something that was absolutely not in my best interest. And when I finally pointed out, because I had the knowledge, he was very embarrassed about it. But we all got to be very careful to make sure we understand. And our advisors should be educating us on what they're doing. If someone's just selling you something, saying, oh, trust me, that's not the solution. The solution is, let me walk you through the illustration. Let me walk through why we're saying you should do this conversion and what it looks like. Take the time, and you're going to find that you're going to be much happier with the results.
Dave, do you find a lot of clients or those you've met with over time that just have, they just don't know how to move on to get that retirement plan?
Yes, I see it all the time, and various reasons for it. Some of it's because they've never learned how to deal with money. Some of it, unfortunately, is because they've had bad experiences. You know, one bad experience could chase someone off from saving for the retirement for the rest of their life. But we've got to get through those things. And lately, we've talked to a number of people. In fact, our last week's podcast was talking to Clarissa that really talked about the emotional behavior and some of the things that happened when we're kids that get us into the financial situations we're now in. And it's very important that we start addressing that stuff as well, that sometimes our financial success is as much about our mental health as it is our financial health.
And Dave, I really appreciate that. We're almost out of time, Dave, and I wanted to get your final comments today, because we've gone through a lot of different topics. We've touched on lots of different areas, but I want to find something that we can help people to just make some changes today. Again, this is our kind of our whole goal as we do this show here.
Yeah, the one thing that I would tell everybody is being in the middle is okay. Again, far too many times we see both ends of the spectrum. We see someone that has absolutely nothing. And again, we have emotions for that, and it's good that we do. And obviously not something where we want to necessarily go, but we see the upper end and we think we've got to have that lifestyle. I'm not a huge follower of Tony Robbins. I do read some of his books, though, when they come out. And he wrote a book called Mastering Money or something like that. Those of you on the show will know it better than I do. But in there, he talked about how many of us can have a much better lifestyle by just renting things. But again, not buying all the stuff out there that's available, but just going and renting it. Don't buy the beach house, rent it for a few weeks. Don't buy the big RV, rent it for a few weeks if you want to use it. And oftentimes that's going to provide a better lifestyle. So don't be afraid to be in the middle, but also make sure you're putting in the work to keep yourself moving forward, and be okay with who you are. Again, whatever it is that you want to accomplish, you don't worry about what the neighbors are doing. Don't worry about what you saw on television. If you're okay, I mean, if we turned all that off and you're happy in the life you're living, what more can you ask for?
Wow, Dave, that's super powerful, and I hope that all those watching live on replay take notes from this and really take this to heart, because I think, Dave, is as we get into retirement and we're looking at different products, we're looking to talk to advisors, put a plan together. I think a lot of people are so hesitant because they just don't know. And I think what you talked about there is making sure, first of all, that you're okay where you are, and then you start taking action. And I think that's something I really appreciate that you talked about today.
And CR, one thing I would tell people too, if you're not comfortable with getting it with an advisor, if you're not comfortable sitting down, maybe you've had a bad experience, educate yourself first then. Get the education that you need so you understand how various things work. I mean, we provide enough education. We can give you a pretty good understanding of the things that you should be looking at, the things you should be considering, maybe areas where you need to spend more time educating yourself, buy some books off Amazon or wherever you find fine books, do some other webinars, maybe even outside of our platform. But get that education so then when you can feel more comfortable, so then you can meet with the advisors, you can get the plans put together, and you can know you're getting what you need to have to get yourself to the goals that you're trying to achieve, whatever that may be for you.
Very well said. And again, if you want to get more of the information that we provide, go to retirementriskadvisors.com. You can click on the CPE webinars at the top, and you can see all the different webinars we have all the way coming up through, I think, July right now. And besides that, Dave, you can go listen to your podcast that comes out every single Friday. We've got so many opportunities on the site for you to learn and gather information. So I really hope you take advantage and do exactly what Dave said, is find an opportunity for you to learn so you have that education, so you're not terrified to sit down and be with someone to ask questions, because sitting with an advisor and having them tell you what to do versus having a conversation is totally a different experience. So Dave, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
All right. And everyone, again, we'll be here every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central Time. So do not forget. So if you have questions and you did not get it today, join us next week or send us an email. You can get to our contact page again at retirementriskadvisors.com, and you can send information there. But if not, we will see you on hopefully another webinar. Maybe see you on the podcast or see you here next week. And until then, we'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.